Hello, my name is Ignacio, I'm 21 years old, I'm Spanish and I study medicine. I'm also very interested in art and I have an art Instagram account by the name of SketchyArtist99 and right now I'm going to try and explain my process of how I paint portraits and how I shade skin and add lighting and shadows to my characters. So without further ado, I'm going to try to make this explanation as clear as possible despite my accent, which might be a bit hard to understand, but hopefully you'll get the idea of how I created this painting. So first of all, as you can see, I start with a base, which is a sketch I created on my sketchbook traditionally. I usually like to sketch traditionally because for some reason I find the blank canvases on Procreate a bit daunting, so I like to start from a base. And as you can see here, like this character has a few errors anatomy wise, like the face was a bit disproportionate, and by sketching it first on a paper and then transferring it to my iPad and painting it on Procreate, I usually can spot these mistakes easier than if I was doing the entire process on one single media. This might just be something personal, but I really find it very helpful to do my paintings like this. And as you can see, I'm lining the painting, which I use the 6B brush that comes with the default set of brushes from Procreate, and I really like this brush because it has a very nice texture and you can really play with its opacity to create very nice effects. And after that I move on to the coloring. So to color in the character, what I do is I pick again the 6B brush and I outline the character and fill in the shape so that I have the basic shape of the character. For this I usually use the skin color, and then on top of that I add clipping masks with different layers for the different colors, for example the color of the hair, the color of the dress, etc. And then I also add another clipping mask for the blushing, which I just pick the soft airbrush brush from the default Procreate set of brushes and I add the blush where I feel like they would naturally be. You can see here that I'm flashing between two different color palettes because at this point I was debating between going with this light skin and red hair version or else going with a dark skin, grey hair and red dress version, but in the end I decided to stick with this version you're seeing right now. So once I'm done with the coloring, I move on to the shading. For the shading, as you can see here, I use the 6B brush again, but made it bigger and made the opacity lower, and I started placing the shadows where I feel like they would look the best in the character, and also think about where the light source would be in this painting. For instance, here the light would be coming slightly from the right and there's a bounce light coming from the left of the canvas. So I started shading the character, as I'm saying, and I used for this the same color I was using for the line art of the character. And this color, you can pick whichever color you like, but usually you should keep in mind the setting you're placing your character in. For example, she's in a very warm room, like the colors of the background, as you will see later, are very warm. So for this reason I picked this purpley color, because shadows, they should usually be a cooler tone, but they should still fit with the setting you're placing your character in. So for this painting I really wasn't using any references, which might be the reason why some of the areas might look a bit inconsistent, but I really would advise everyone to use references when you are shading your characters, which doesn't mean you necessarily need a reference that exactly fits the shading or the composition of your artwork, but it usually helps to have an inspiration or a picture that has a similar lighting as the painting you're trying to create, because that way it helps you really to figure out how to shade and how to tackle the lighting of your characters. And I feel like, especially with portraits, it is very important to look for references so that your anatomy makes sense, because even if you are creating a very cartoony character, it's very helpful to make the anatomy of your character make sense. So the next few steps happen a bit fast, so I'm going to try and explain them as clearly as possible. So the first thing I do is I turn the shading into a multiply layer, and then on top of that I add a normal layer with a slightly lighter color than the skin, and I use that to add the highlights to the skin. Then over all of that I add a multiply layer with the color of the background to make the character match the background, and then I use the soft airbrush as an eraser to erase the areas where I want the strongest highlights to be in the character. So after this I add another overlay layer to the canvas, and I use the soft airbrush to add the lighting to the character. For this I use a color that fits the lighting of the scenery, which in this case is a light yellow. Then on top of this I create another overlay layer, and for this one I will use the 6B brush, and this is where I add the highlights to the hair and also some of the strongest highlights to the skin, as well as the bounce light, which you can see on the left side of the character, where I used a slightly orange color to make the reflection of the background on the character. I also like to add another normal layer on top of all of this, and I use the soft airbrush to add some redness to the skin. I usually add this in the points where the light fades into the shadows, and I think that this gives the skin a lot of life. So at this point basically I have done all of the shading of the character and all of the lighting, and now it's just a matter of adding details and rendering the painting. As you can see, I still have the line art on the painting and the final product didn't have it, so what I do now is I pick the 6B brush as a smudging tool, and I will start to smudge the lines into the shadows of the character so that I end up having a lineless look. Also at this point I add another normal layer on top of all of the painting, and I will use this to add the final details like smaller hairs or finer hairs that come out of the character, as well as the reflections and the details to the eyes, the eyelashes, and all of this kind of stuff, as well as the sparkles and any other details. For me personally, this is the most fun stage of the painting because now you can really see how the final product is going to look like, and it's just a matter of refining it and adding extra details, which I think is the most enjoyable part for any painting. So that's basically the entire process on how I shade my characters. I know this explanation might be a bit brief, and I could definitely go into more detail and explain things more calmly, but this is my first ever time attempting to do a tutorial on anything, so I hope you will forgive me for not being perfect. This is also the process that I'm going to use to shade the characters in the background, although for the characters in the background I do not render them as much because in the end I'm going to add a Gaussian blur to make the characters less noticeable and bring the attention to the main character of the painting, and I can also use this process to shade backgrounds and objects. For the characters you're seeing in the background right now, they were a really last minute thought I had because I was starting to imagine this girl that is disguised as a fox attending a masquerade ball where all of the attendants are disguised themselves as animals. So I decided to make a character disguised as a bunny, a character that's disguised as a bird or a swan or something like that, and I really had a lot of fun creating these characters. And even though in the end they are not a really big part of the painting, I think they really help to create a very nice atmosphere. So this painting was part of a collaboration I did with other Instagram artists where we had a prompt, which was a picture of a fox with red, white and grey hair, and we had to design a female character based on the fox. And for me it was really fun to think about how I could incorporate the elements of the fox, such as the ears and the tail, which I turned into the hairdo, and I also incorporate the colors in the dress and the hair of the character. And I also really enjoyed diving deeper into the concept of the artwork and creating an entire scene around it. In the end, even if the painting is not perfect, I really had a great time painting it. In fact, it only took about 2 days or 3 to complete, which is pretty fast for me. And yeah, I'm pretty satisfied with the result and I hope you all liked it too. I want to thank you all for watching this video, and I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope that in the future I can make better videos explaining my process better. And if you're interested in me explaining something more specific about my painting process, please just comment it and I will do my best to do so. So again, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful and I hope you all have a wonderful day. Bye.